All right. Are you guys ready to get started? Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to keep admitting people as they come in, but thank you for joining us today. I'm Allison Pearson. I'm here at the Whitesbog General Store, which we're going to see some pictures of, I believe, later today. And I'm the executive director for Whitesbog Preservation Trust. So we've been here at Whitesbog Village since the early 80s, working to preserve all of the buildings and stories and save a lot of the history of this historic farm for both blueberries and cranberries. That's still an active farm. So we're still farming from the family members of Elizabeth White today. So we're super excited for today's program. This is part of our Winter Speaker Series. Dr. Segan came out to Whitesbog maybe 2 years ago now and introduced herself. We learned about her father, Arthur Rothstein's photographs. So we had known about his collection from the Library of Congress. We were super excited that they had more images that maybe we've never seen before. And part of that Arthur Rothstein Legacy Project is telling people about all of his amazing work that he did. For 50 years, he was photographing, and we'll learn all about that right now. But Dr. Segan is an author and a presenter who will share all about her father. Thank you for joining us.
Well, here we go. Wait a second. Ready? My dad, Arthur Rothstein, began his illustrious 50-year career as a social documentary photographer, a storyteller with a camera. He used his camera to draw attention to issues affecting society. In October 1938, when he was just 23 years old, he was sent on assignment to southern New Jersey. America was in the depths of the Great Depression, and most of the country was racked by unemployment. Millions were impoverished through no fault of their own, and only their government could help them. My father's photo stories provided visual evidence to support the mission of a federal agency that had the resources to help. Most of the pictures I'll share with you today were from his 1938 assignment in New Jersey, particularly Whitesbog. But I'll also share some pictures that show conditions that existed in surrounding counties. First, I'm going to tell you all about my dad and his early career that led to his New Jersey assignment. That's my dad, Arthur Rothstein, on the left when he was about 10 years old. He was born in 1915 in New York City to Jewish immigrants who had been forced from their homes in Eastern Europe by government-sanctioned anti-Jewish pogroms. As a result, Arthur had a lifelong fascination with the stories of migrants, refugees, and people dispossessed by forces beyond their control. Dad took an immediate interest in photography when he received a camera for his 12th birthday. At 15, he graduated from Stuyvesant High School in New York City. That's him, front and center. You can see him right there. Hi, Dad. In short pants at his high school graduation picture, because in those days, boys younger than 16 wore knickers, not trousers. At 16, Dad entered Columbia University. He set up the Columbia Camera Club and was photo editor of the 1935 Columbian Yearbook. These are the members of the University Camera Club posing on the newly opened George Washington Bridge. During college, Arthur used his photographic and darkroom skills to earn extra money making photocopies. Remember, this was before the copy machine existed. A faculty member at Columbia, Roy Stryker, wrote heavily illustrated textbooks, and he hired Arthur to make photocopies for his next book. However, before he could finish the book, Roy Stryker was called to Washington, D.C. to work for what later became the Farm Security Administration, referred to as the FSA, one of President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal agencies. Because of the Great Depression, displaced, impoverished workers had become America's internal migrants and refugees. Stryker's agency focused on helping struggling industrial and agricultural workers by providing loans, grants, housing, and other assistance. Soon after Stryker was hired in Washington, my father graduated from Columbia in June of 1935, just a few weeks before his 20th birthday. Roy Stryker's main job at the FSA was to document the need for its programs and to demonstrate their positive impact on the daily lives of Americans. He believed that photographs could help convince Congress and the American public that there was a real need for government action. Stryker hired Dad to set up a darkroom in Washington, D.C., and soon he sent Dad out on photo assignments. Arthur Rothstein was the first of more than a dozen photographers hired by Stryker. You could see Stryker here on the right. That's Roy Stryker. And there's my dad. Despite his excellent education, Arthur had not traveled outside the New York City area, and he did not even know how to drive because he was a city kid and he took public transportation. He spent most of the next 8 years driving around the United States on photo assignments that could last for weeks or months. My dad traveled with cameras, film, and photo equipment. He had a sleeping bag because there were very few interstate highways back then, so he often took back roads and was prepared to sleep in his car. He also carried an axe and a shovel to dig himself out of the mud or the snow. He had a coffee percolator and a portable Coleman stove. Here's one of his early photo assignments. In 1935, Dad was sent to the hills of Virginia, where hundreds of families were being displaced from land that would soon become the Shenandoah National Park. In the future parkland, high up in isolated mountain hollows, families were living in primitive conditions. The federal government constructed clusters of homes in the foothills for resettlement of the displaced families. Before the relocations were complete, Arthur Rothstein documented a way of life that had changed very little since the 1800s, and it would soon be lost and gone forever. Here's another example of a Rothstein assignment that was picked up by the press and resulted in positive social change. It was perhaps his most famous assignment. In the spring of 1936, Arthur was sent to document drought conditions that were displacing thousands of farmers and ranchers. The worst of the crop failures and dust storms were in the Dust Bowl area of the Oklahoma Panhandle. Near Boise City, Dad was photographing the Coble family farm when a dust storm began to kick up the sandy soil. The farmer and his two young sons ran for the house, and Dad ran for his car. He turned to wave goodbye and took this picture, which became an iconic symbol of the Great Depression and one of the most widely reproduced photographs of the 20th century. During these years, Dad's picture stories were featured in newspapers and magazines across the country. Arthur Rothstein's iconic images were frequently referenced in popular culture, like this U.S. Postal Service commemorative issuance. As he continued to work for the FSA photo unit, his assignments often took him out west. The West seemed very exotic to Dad, a kid from the Bronx. He later published a book of photographs on the American West in the 1930s. His trips out west resulted in a lifelong affection for cowboy culture. The FSA photo unit photographers created a broad portrait of America and a national historical record. As America prepared for war, the photo unit of the FSA was merged into the Office of War Information, or OWI, a propaganda machine used to promote the war effort. This defense bond display at Grand Central Terminal in 1942 incorporated Arthur's photographs to create an emotional impact on the public. Dad produced other important work for OWI. He shot the cover picture and additional photos for this OWI publication that highlighted the important role of African American soldiers and civilians in the war effort. Roy Stryker was successful in preserving the entire FSA OWI photo collection at the Library of Congress, where they are permanently available to the public in person and online. This documentary photo collection is now considered to be a national treasure. That's me. During World War II, Arthur served in the U.S. Army Signal Corps. He was an instructor, a combat photographer, and a photo editor. And a photo officer. He edited pictures too. This picture is called Learning to Salute. Dad took this photograph of FDR and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill at a highly secret meeting during which the Allies planned the D-Day invasion of France. His unit was ordered to the China-Burma India Theater. When World War II ended, Arthur was stationed in China. He took an assignment as chief photographer in China for the United Nations relief agency known as UNRWA. He documented UNRWA's enormous relief effort in a country shattered by war. Arthur Rothstein's experience with the FSA prepared him perfectly for this photo assignment. Dad traveled extensively in China, documenting widespread famine and UNRWA relief activities such as the distribution of rice in this picture. He captured a broad portrait of daily life in China. By the fall of 1946, Arthur was back in New York City. He began a long and successful career at Look magazine. This was the golden age of magazine photography, and Look magazine was about people, culture, and the news of the week. The same weekend he returned home from China, Dad met Mom, Grace Goodman. For the next 25 years, until Look magazine folded in 1971, Arthur Rothstein served as director of photography. He created picture stories on topics from medicine to fashion to food. He obviously shot in color as well as in black and white. Arthur photographed many celebrities. This is Salvador Dali and his mustache. Here's the glamorous and talented singer and actress Eartha Kitt. He even covered the occasional celebrity wedding. This is the receiving line at the wedding of actor Tony Curtis on the left and actress Janet Leigh. The other fellow is actor-comedian Jerry Lewis, who one can only imagine asked Tony, "May I kiss the bride?" Here's a construction worker playing bagpipes to relax on his lunch hour. You can see the Empire State Building right behind him. There is a Look magazine archive maintained at the Museum of the City of New York. It includes thousands of Arthur Rothstein's New York City pictures. You can view them all online. Dad was extremely grateful for his career, and he made every effort to give back to the photography community. He hired and mentored countless photographers. He received dozens of awards and was active in professional organizations, including the Photo League and the American Society of Magazine Photographers. He was a juror for the Pulitzer Prize in Photography. He taught at several schools, including Columbia University School of Journalism and Parsons School of Design. He wrote numerous columns and articles on photography and published these 9 books, including widely used textbooks on photojournalism and documentary photography. After Look magazine ceased to print in 1971, Arthur took a job at Parade, the most widely read magazine in America. He remained there as photo editor until his death in 1985. For this Parade cover, Dad had a little fun using himself as the model. Obviously, just scratching the surface of his 50-year career. Dad photographed 9 American presidents. I could go on, but instead, I'm going to tell you about his 1938 assignment in New Jersey. So, in October of 1938, Arthur Rothstein's boss at the Farm Security Administration photo unit, Roy Stryker, sent him on a photo assignment to central and southern New Jersey. You can see on the map that he photographed conditions from the Delaware Bay up through Cumberland and Gloucester and Camden counties. He visited fishing villages, farms, towns, and cities. He also went to farming areas around Freehold and Monmouth County, and then completed an extensive photo survey of the cranberry harvest underway at Whitesbog in Burlington County. Dad's boss, Roy Stryker, was an academic, so since Dad's assignment was in New Jersey, Stryker would have had him research this state in this encyclopedia called North America. You might be wondering why he chose to document New Jersey in the first place. Well, the Farm Security Administration was an enormous federal agency with county agents throughout the country. They were familiar with local conditions and would suggest subjects for Stryker's photographic assignments. Dad took hundreds of photographs in New Jersey on this assignment in 1938. Today, I have time to share just a few dozen, beginning with towns in Delaware Bay. After 3 years on assignment for the FSA, Arthur Rothstein had become very proficient at documenting the conditions and daily life of a community and the details that made a place unique. Up to the mid-1950s, oyster farming was big business on the Jersey side of Delaware Bay, and entire towns like Byville in Cumberland County grew up around that industry. The oysterman on the left is holding a dredge used for gathering oysters. As a seasoned documentary photographer, Arthur sometimes provided long, informative descriptions in his photo titles and captions. Other titles were simple and direct. Seafood Restaurant, Bivalve, New Jersey. From his research, Arthur would have known that oyster shuckers were often seasonal workers from Delaware and Maryland. They would arrive in September and find housing in the vicinity of Port Morris in Cumberland County and work as pickers on local farms until the oyster season got underway. In the late 1930s, bivalve was vital to the oyster industry on the East Coast. It was a segregated white enclave. Shell Pile was a neighboring African American community of oyster shuckers, also on Delaware Bay. Shell Pile is described in an excerpt in this excerpt from the 1939 Federal Guidebook on New Jersey in language of the day. Quote, Shell Pile is named for the great heaps of oyster shells stacked outside the packing sheds. It is a community of about 1,000 Negroes living in wooden barracks. Some are erected on stilts over the salt marshes. White strangers are not welcome in Shell Pile. End quote. That interesting sign above the table says, kidding or joking about anyone's wife or family is strictly forbidden. I love that. Dad left Delaware Bay and went inland. He documented housing conditions of low-income workers in the Millville area of Cumberland County and around Glassboro in Gloucester County. This is Millville. The title of this photograph is Inadequate Housing Forces Mill Workers to Pay High Rent for Shacks Like This. He captured a close-up portrait of the man in this image, titled Mill Worker, Millville, New Jersey. Poor housing conditions were a focus of the Farm Security Administration. This image is titled Fishing Boat Used as Home for Mill Workers. Here's another example. Abandoned truck body in which mill workers live. From Millville, my father drove north to the Glassboro section in Gloucester County. He visited a failed real estate development on the western fringe of Glassboro known as 80 Acres. On this 1923 map, downtown Glassboro is on the right and the 80 Acres development is on the left. In 1923, it was marketed as Glassboro Estates. Sounds snazzy. The blue circle marks the corner of Lincoln Boulevard and Ohio Avenue within Glassboro Estates. Well, here's that intersection 15 years later in 1938, not too snazzy. Unfortunately, the community never received full municipal services, and many houses were occupied when only partially complete. Black residents of the area were barred from most industrial jobs and neighborhoods in Glassboro. As a result, farm workers, sharecroppers, and other low-income laborers moved into the declining community of 80 Acres. Arthur Rothstein next visited both rural and urban areas of Camden County. He visited orchards to photograph seasonal pickers of apples and nearby apple packing houses. It's a little difficult to see the labels on these boxes, but they're packing Jersey Jerry brand apples that some of you locals may be familiar with. Elsewhere in rural Camden County, crops were harvested by Italian immigrants who lived in local towns and left their homes to live and work on farms during the picking season from May through October. One survey of the Italian farm workers employed in South Jersey in 1938 found that half of them were women with children. These women harvesting carrots came from the Italian section of Philadelphia to work on truck farms in Camden County. Some local farms were operated by tenant farmers, like this man shown here with his son. I love this portrait. Look in the background, you could see Mom. During this assignment, my dad took dozens of photographs in Camden. I'll just share a couple of them with you. This is South 2nd Street. These are factory workers' homes in Camden and a peddler's pushcart. After Camden, Dad continued north to Monmouth County. While researching this assignment, Dad read a 1938 newspaper article which describes how seasonal workers in Freehold were abused and exploited. In 1938, potato pickers in the Freehold area were primarily unattached Black men from Florida and Virginia. 40% of them were year-round crop followers. They stayed in New Jersey from mid-July into October. Back then, those migratory workers from southern states picked potatoes for 6 cents a bag. That's a very large sack of potatoes to earn 6 cents. The migrant potato workers potato pickers were often boarded in shacks and in tar paper barracks, or they were crowded into houses in town furnished by the farm owners. Now that we've seen some of the surrounding counties, let's explore my dad's photos of Whitesbog. Historically, Whitesbog has been the largest cranberry farm in New Jersey, covering several hundred acres of Burlington County. It's been in operation since the mid-1800s. When Arthur Rothstein arrived at Whitesbog, he parked at the general store that served the community. That's Dad's 1935 Ford Coupe parked in front, the same car he drove back and forth across America on photo assignments. If you visited Whitesbog Historic Village, you'll recognize the general store and the water tower. The porch has been extended around the building. Otherwise, they remain pretty much the same as they did 80 years ago. That's me in front of the store last year. And that's the very same view without me in 1938. Now I'm going to move quickly through more than 50 of Arthur Rothstein's photographs, well, not too quickly, of the cranberry harvest in 1938. So don't blink or you'll miss something. During the harvest, cranberry pickers began their long day in simple barracks provided by the farm owners. Seasonal cranberry workers stayed at Whitesbog quarters for the entire picking season. Whitesbog provided Spartan housing with 10 by 10 foot rooms, 4 people to a room. Whitesbog had 3 main living areas. Permanent workers lived in the main village. There were 2 other village housing clusters referred to as Rome and Florence for the seasonal workers. Many children lived and worked with their families. Dad's title for this picture is Boy Cranberry Picker at Barracks Housing for Cranberry Workers. Housing for seasonal workers appears not to have had indoor plumbing or kitchens. Here's an outdoor water pump. The title of this picture is Water Supply at Cranberry Picker's Shack. Dad noted, shack in which families of cranberry pickers are crowded together. You can see the laundry drying there. Here is a view of washing and toilet facilities for cranberry pickers and privy near cranberry picker's shack. Outdoor plumbing. No, I mean, not plumbing, outdoor privy. This title is Here is where cranberry pickers do their laundry. I'm not sure if the kitty already lived at Whitesbog or arrived with the seasonal workers. Housing for seasonal workers did not include kitchens. Dad remarked that outdoor ovens were provided, along with rudimentary cooking facilities for cranberry pickers. He photographed outdoor eating places for workers. With hundreds of acres at Whitesbog, it's quite a distance from the workers' living quarters to the fields. Many pickers would be transported to and from the fields in trucks provided by labor contractors. The owner of the cranberry bog checks with the field boss as pickers collect their boxes and leave the cranberry checking station to head out into the field. Pickers fanned out into vast fields of cranberry bushes, growing close to the damp, sandy soil. You can see the water tower next to the general store in the background. And there are those large buildings where the cranberries were processed, sorted and processed. See, there's the water tower. Dad noted, cranberry pickers and bog. Looks like a family unit to me. And women with the little girl picking cranberries. Girl picking cranberries. Dad's short descriptive titles continue. Most of the pickers are Italian families from South Philadelphia. My father's title explained that the head of the family is the only one who gets paid. This probably referred to a simplified payment system in which the owner or labor contractor paid the head of the family for all the cranberries picked by the entire family. Payment for pickers is based on the number of pecks they picked. A peck is a dry measure equivalent to 8 quarts or 2 gallons. A bushel is 4 pecks or 8 gallons. In many of these photos, the pickers are using 2 hands to scrape the cranberries from the bushes into the bowls, and then they're emptied into the boxes used to measure production. In 1938, many of the pickers employed at Whitesbog were family groups with many children who were kept out of school for the first 2 months of the school year. The owner of the farm found these pickers through a padrone, Italian for boss. This was an established system using labor contractors who were typically immigrants themselves. The padrone spoke Italian and acted as middlemen between the immigrant workers and the farm owners. A padrone recruited families of pickers, arranged for their transport to and from the farm, and acted as foremen in the bogs. The padrone in this image is supervising a group of his pickers. When the cranberry bushes became dry enough, the pickers could use these specialized comb scoops to strip the berries from the plants. The title of this photo is Cranberry Scoopers with Padrone, labor contractor, supervising their work. This image is titled Men Scooping Cranberries. This method of gathering cranberries is used only when haste is necessary and the boys have older vines. Dad noted, the cranberry scoops are heavy and could only be used by strong pickers. Hand-picking of cranberries is hard work and probably quite strenuous with the scoop. This young man looks to be a bit overdressed with his necktie. The title of this image is Cranberry Scooper Emptying the Contents of His Scoop. As a skillful documentary photographer, Arthur Rothstein was careful to show the details of his subject matter. He showed how tools were used and the details of work procedures and all facets of pickers' working conditions. This title is Portable Privy, used by over 200 cranberry pickers. Sometimes his captions described specific details in depth. For example, during the picking process, many of the cranberries are torn from the vines and fall to the ground. The bogs are then flooded and agitated with the hydroplane, which causes the cranberries to float. Then workers can gather cranberries that are floating on the surface of the flooded bog. If you look closely, you'll see that the worker on the right is gathering floating berries with a comb scoop, while the man on the left is using a sieve. Title is Wagon for Transporting Cranberries from Bog to Sorting House. Here's another view of the wagon loaded with cranberries heading to the sorting house from the bog. Title is Packing and Sorting House at Whitesbog. Title is Child Labor, Cranberry Bog. Back in 1913, another photographer, Lewis Hine, had documented child labor at Whitesbog. This is one of his photographs. Hine worked for the National Committee on Child Labor. His pictures of Whitesbog appeared in Good Housekeeping magazine in November 1913. The article was titled, How Immigrants Built Whitesbog and America. It challenged Americans to consider who picked the berries in their Thanksgiving dinner cranberry sauce. Arthur Rothstein worked for the Roosevelt administration and knew that images like this one supported the government's efforts to end child labor. The title of this image is Girl Picker at Cranberry Bog. 3/4 of all pickers are children. In 1938, more than 25 years after Lewis Hine's Whitesbog photos were published, FDR's Labor Secretary, Frances Perkins, was still pressing Congress to pass legislation to outlaw child labor. Her efforts resulted in the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which became effective in October, the very same month Arthur was in Whitesbog. The act did outlaw certain types of industrial child labor, but did not significantly reduce child labor in agriculture. So child labor continued on farms throughout the country. The long-standing tradition of collective family labor continued at Whitesbog, which had a reputation as a relatively benign workspace for children. These young cranberry pickers are carrying their full boxes to the checking station. My dad's pictures brought renewed attention to the subject of child labor in agriculture, just as Lewis Hines' photographs had done a quarter of a century earlier on behalf of the Committee on Child Labor. Arthur also captured many interesting portraits of hardworking pickers. Title: Migratory Worker with Load of Cranberries. His images are a window into a world that most Americans never see. Hard-working immigrants feeding the nation. He showed us strong Italian grandmothers, resilient, hard-working boys and girls, and rugged young men. I love this picture. Title is Cranberry Scooper Drinking from the Top of a Milk Jar. Title of this image is Padroni at Checking Station for Cranberry Pickers. Altogether, the pictures Dad took at Whitesbog provide an intimate view of the harvest and of the Italian immigrant families who traveled from South Philadelphia to work in the bogs. Dad noted that the man on the right is the owner of Whitesbog. At the end of the day, the labor contractor's truck is loaded up with pickers. They climb into the truck that will carry them back to their barracks. Here's a lovely portrait of a hardworking woman. It's been a long day. Here's a family portrait. Arthur Rothstein's 1938 study of the cranberry harvest at Whitesbog ends here. And I'll end my presentation with just a few family pictures, family photos, and a quotation that expresses perfectly my father's approach to photography. Both of my parents were photographers, as were many of their closest friends and colleagues. This is a nice selfie of Dad with photographers Ansel Adams and Dorothea Lange. Here's the quote. Ansel Adams said, "You don't take a photograph just with a camera. You bring to the act of photography all the pictures you have seen, the books you have read, the music you have heard, and the people you have loved." Thank you.
That was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was beautiful. I love the family photos. Those are fantastic too. It's nice to have a photographic family because then you get more documentation of your family.
It's true. We are one of the most documented families I think you could ever imagine.
That's wonderful. Yeah, such gorgeous portraits. I love the portraits of the workers in the field. They're just so amazing.
Me too.
Wow. Okay. So we do have a couple questions in the chat box. If everybody can type questions in there, if you've got some questions that came up during the presentation. Someone asked if it was going to be recorded. I said, yes, we are recording the whole presentation and we are going to share it later.
Wonderful. And where will it be shared?
We were going to share it on YouTube.
Great.
So we'll just post it on YouTube.
So people can go to YouTube and find it.
Yeah, Whitesbog has a YouTube channel with all of our videos and oral history recordings.
Wonderful.
And Keith asked, do we know the status of the children? Had they dropped out of school or was this summer work for young children?
I think one of the things I found out actually was that, one of the facts I found out is that the children did miss school at the beginning of the season, every season. Those children who were in the family collectives picking cranberries, or doing other agricultural work in other parts of the country. They missed school while they were working in the field, but then they went to school the rest of the time, the rest of the year. And in the case of the pickers at Whitesbog from the Italian immigrant communities, those children grew up bilingual. I mean, it wasn't like they missed a whole lot. They had other wonderful aspects of their education.
Okay. Dave Orleans asked, are any of the pictures verified to be of the housing at Rome Village?
No. I don't know if any of that is, I don't know if he even went to Rome Village or to Florence Village, and those are obviously named to make the Italian immigrants at home, comfortable at home.
Yeah, I know some of the photographs were labeled Burlington County and some are specifically Whitesbog, but you can see like the water tower in some of them.
Yeah,
so you know that
right.
it's Whitesbog. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, you can tell if you go to the Library of Congress, you could see what photograph was taken before and after a photograph. So oh, if that was Whitesbog, this has to be Whitesbog because the next one's Whitesbog. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this person, it just says MacBook, said, did your father also print the photographs himself?
No, he did not. He did not print this assignment. Later in his life, he had many photographs from this assignment, which he did print. But when he had an assignment, very often, and he was on the road, remember, he was on the road, very often he would send back the film or give it to the county representative from the Farm Security Administration, and they would send it back because he had to keep going.
And you said, I know some of the pictures, when you look at them, they have a hole punch in the center of the picture.
Yes.
That was the editor?
Yes. So Roy Stryker was a brilliant editor, and he was a much loved person. But he had this way of editing because he had a lot of work to do. And the fastest way to edit, he thought, was to take a hole punch and punch a hole in the negative that he wasn't happy with. Now, we've found a lot of terrific pictures that had hole punches in them, so we don't know why he wasn't happy with them. But after a while, the photographers made it very clear to Roy that he should stop doing that. It took a long time, took years to get him to stop doing that. But finally they did, and he found another way to edit.
Wow. Yeah, one of the pictures I think is of the general store, has a big hole in the oh, there's a question. Did your dad ever photograph the Jewish community of Woodbine, New Jersey, South Jersey?
Roosevelt, New Jersey, correct? Yeah,
it was also called. Is south. I don't know if it's Roosevelt.
I don't think he did.
Okay.
I'll have to look that up. Wow, that would be new to me.
Okay.
Write it down, Bertie. Yeah, because I know he photographed Heightstown, which was also a Jewish community that was created for factory workers and farmers.
How long was he here at Whitesbog?
I don't know. I wish I did. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
And so he kept written notes as well when he was on assignment, or is it?
He kept notes. Sometimes they would appear on the back of the photograph, and so what would happen is he would send in his film, and then they would process the film in the darkroom that he had set up in Washington, D.C. And the photo lab technicians would make a stack of the photographs. And then when he got back from his assignments, he would then sit in front of the pile and go take his notes and go over that assignment.
Okay.
That's the way that worked. But sometimes the people who were working in the dark room added information that was not right. So it's you have to be very careful about what's fact. Well, you don't even know sometimes what's factual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of our photographs that are in the collection, they'll have like all different writing in different colors of pen and marker
Yeah,
and wax
right.
pencil,
Yeah,
everything on the back.
yeah.
Tom Rizzo said he's hoping to see his father and family who survived thanks to working on farms in southern New Jersey. Not this time, but it was great seeing and feeling
Oh,
the stories his father had told him.
oh, that's lovely.
What type of photography did your mom do?
Oh, my mom was a portrait photographer,
Wow.
and my dad built her a studio in the garage behind the house. And she had a very successful business. In fact, she was even the official photographer for the city of New Rochelle, New York, which is where my parents lived.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Keith asked, what do we know, if anything, about the Padrone?
Padrone, I think, but I
What
don't
was
speak
their
Italian.
relationship like with the workers?
Well, you would know that, wouldn't you, Allison?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know that what we've heard is that they recruited people in their communities to work at the farm. And our sense is that the same families would keep coming back every year. You know, if
Yeah.
you got a good group of people, they would come back and pick with you. But I'm not quite sure, how they felt about each other.
Everything looked very pleasant in the pictures, didn't it?
Yeah.
Nobody was crying or frowning.
That's true. Dave Orleans asked, have you been in contact with the Bayshore Discovery Project, the AJ Meerwald group? They have recreated much of the oyster industry at Bivalve and Port Norris and would probably be very interested in the photographs.
Thank you. I will do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought those pictures were amazing. I've been down in Bivalve. We did some work down there, and I've seen the oyster piles, so I know that it is still going
Amazing.
on.
Yeah. And that guy wasn't wearing gloves. Did you see that? He was shucking oysters without gloves on.
That's rough.
That's a pro.
Matthew asked, who took this picture that we're looking at right now
Which picture?
of your dad and mom?
Oh, that picture. That's a good story. I don't know the photographer's name, but this was the last trip that my parents took together in 1984. Yeah. And the picture was later used in a Payless, is that the name of it? Car, huh? A, in a budget, was it budget rent-a-car ad?
Oh, wow.
And they replaced the glass. This is what was disturbing, though. The photographer sold it to an advertising company. The advertising company or someone replaced the glass or just got rid of the glass in his hand. And that was very upsetting to my mother when she was sitting at the kitchen table after my dad died and turned the page and saw a half-page ad for a budget rent-a-car with dad and mom. I mean, can you imagine her shock?
Oh, my Lord. Wow.
Yeah.
Charlotte asked, where was your dad living? Where was your family home while he was traveling with the FSA?
Well, we weren't a family yet.
Yeah.
We weren't a family. My mom and dad met in 1946 when he returned from China. The weekend he returned from China, he met my mother. And like most people
lived
who
on the
had
road
been,
from place to place.
sorry?
He just lived on the road from place to place.
Oh, he lived in Washington, D.C. for a long time. Yeah. And then he shared an apartment with other people. And then he also had an apartment in Manhattan when he was living in New York City. But yeah, he was on the road a lot. He was on the road for almost 8 years. Yeah.
Peter said Woodbine was also created for factory workers and farmers to get the poor Jewish people out of the crowded New York City Lower East Side.
Ah, interesting. Well, now that he mentions that, another nice thing that I read about the families, the Italian families in from South Philly, was that the parents, the families of felt that it was very healthy to take to take the children out into the country where it was not in the not in the inner city, not dangerous, and have them out in the country all summer. That makes sense.
Terry asked, in the portrait of your dad and mom, is that the studio behind them with the stove stack
Yes,
in
it
the corner?
is. And
Oh,
that picture was taken by Philippe Halsman, very
wow.
famous photographer.
Charlotte said she'd love to see the photos by your mom.
Oh,
What a treat to be the daughter of two photographers. What was that like?
it was great. My family's history is so well documented. My sister and brothers and I were little, we were used as models all the time. So whenever my parents, they also did commercials and advertisements. And so whenever they needed little kids, they would use one of us. So we were plastered all over the place. We were in newspapers and magazines, on billboards. I was the post sugar crisp girl, the little kid with the three bears and the braids eating
Oh, wow.
cereal. That was me. We were everywhere.
That's amazing. Dave Orlean says he was thinking about there's a photograph from Whitesbog of an old woman cooking outdoors in an old wood stove with an old man behind her posing. Was that taken by your father or someone else?
I don't think so. It doesn't sound familiar to me.
Okay. Yeah, I know we have it in our collection.
Yeah, there have been other people taking pictures at Whitesbog, not just Dad.
Yes. Can you show the photo of your parents when they were younger with your mom looking into her camera?
The photo.
I think you're talking about one of the last photos in the collection.
Isn't that sweet? That's the one that Philippe Halsman took.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I like the name title on the.
It's adorable. Yeah.
Dennis is asking, did your father ever face prejudice?
Yes, he did. He certainly did. He told me a story once about how he was chased by the Ku Klux Klan. He also was referred to by names that I shall not mention here. Strangers, of course, no one he knew. He wasn't treated badly by people he knew.
Wow. Awesome. Okay. Is that a Rolleiflex your mom is shooting with?
Sure looks like one to me.
Yeah. Oh, and Eric asked, does New Rochelle or anyone have an archive of your mother's work?
Oh, I tried to find something about that at City Hall because she was the official photographer for years, and I couldn't find anyone to help me. So maybe it exists somewhere, and I just didn't find the right person. I'll try again.
That's amazing.
I have some of those pictures. They're basically guys in suits. She was photographing this official and this official shaking that official's hand and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I think that's the end of the questions. So we have lots of comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Allison, for this opportunity. We love Whitesbog.
Wonderful.
We can't wait to get back there. We can't wait till you have Blueberry Festival again.
Yes. We'll be very excited. And if you want to find out more about the Arthur Rothstein project, I put the link in the chat. It's right up the top.
Thank you.
And if you want to find out more about Whitesbog, it's just whitesbog.org is our website.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good
Be
weekend.
well. Wear your mask. Like Allison.
Welcome.